Red Bull reveals big upgrades for this week's race. The McLaren drivers could be in for a grid penalty. And Ferrari makes a final decision on Verstappen's future. Picture this. While most Formula One teams are frantically preparing for the biggest rule changes in decades, Red Bull is doing something completely different. They're still developing their current car with just weeks left in the season. Are they making a massive mistake? Or do they know something everyone else doesn't? What's happening right now in Formula One is absolutely fascinating. We're witnessing two completely opposite philosophies collide at the most critical moment in recent F1 history. The 2026 regulations represent the most dramatic overhaul the sport has seen in years, yet Red Bull continues pouring resources into their current machine while their rivals have already switched focus entirely. Let me break down what's really going on behind the scenes. Red Bull's team principal Laurent Mekies just made some explosive statements that reveal their true strategy. While McLaren's Andrea Stella warns that continuing development would heavily compromise their 2026 preparations, Mekies is doubling down on a completely different approach. Here's the situation. Max Verstappen has cut what was once a massive championship deficit down to just 36 points, with 4 races remaining. This incredible comeback coincides perfectly with Red Bull's continued development push. While other teams threw in the towel months ago, Red Bull kept bringing updates, tweaks, and improvements to every single race. The results speak for themselves. McLaren dominated the first half of the season with their MCL39, but as Red Bull continued developing, that performance advantage has steadily eroded. Now we have one of the most exciting championship battles in years, with Verstappen hunting down both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri in the final stretch. But here's where it gets really interesting. Mekies openly admits there will be consequences for their 2026 car. He's not trying to hide it or sugarcoat the situation. Red Bull knows exactly what they're sacrificing, and they're doing it anyway. The question is, why would any team willingly compromise their future for a few more tenths of performance today? The answer reveals something much deeper about Red Bull's problems and their long-term strategy. For years, the Milton Keynes team has struggled with correlation issues between their simulated data and real-world performance. Their computer models and wind tunnel results haven't been matching what happens on track, which is absolutely critical for developing competitive cars. This is where Red Bull's gamble becomes genius. They're not just chasing a championship, they're using these final races as a massive validation exercise. Every update they bring, every piece of data they collect, helps them understand whether their development tools are actually working correctly. This knowledge becomes invaluable when they start building their 2026 Challenger. Mekies explained their thinking perfectly. They're using the same tools and methodology for next year's car that they're using now. If they can't trust their current data, how can they build a competitive car for the new regulations? By continuing development, they're essentially calibrating their entire system. Meanwhile, McLaren has taken the complete opposite approach. Stella argues that their car was already aerodynamically mature, meaning further development would yield diminishing returns. Instead of fighting for scraps of performance, they've redirected everything toward 2026, where they believe the real opportunities lie. McLaren's position makes perfect sense from a resource allocation perspective. As the current Constructors' champions, they face the most restrictive development limits under the regulations. They get less wind tunnel time and fewer computational fluid dynamics allocations than their competitors. Every hour spent on the current car is an hour not spent on their future. Stella also points out something crucial. In the 2026 car development, they're finding massive performance gains every week. Compare that to their current situation, where adding even 1 point of aerodynamic efficiency takes weeks of work. From a pure numbers perspective, the math strongly favors focusing on 2026. But Red Bull sees a bigger picture. They believe the correlation issues they've experienced mean they had more room for efficient development on their current car. More importantly, they might be willing to sacrifice some 2026 performance because they suspect they have other advantages or solutions that McLaren doesn't. This creates an absolutely fascinating dynamic. We're essentially watching two teams bet their futures on completely different philosophies. McLaren is playing the long game, banking everything on having the best possible 2026 car from day one. Red Bull is playing for validation and knowledge, accepting short-term pain for long-term understanding. The psychological aspect cannot be ignored either. Red Bull's continued development sends a GAR message to the entire grid about their commitment and resources. It demonstrates confidence in their ability to compete on multiple fronts simultaneously. This kind of mental warfare has always been part of Formula One's chess game. What makes this story even more compelling is the timing. The championship battle itself has become secondary to this fundamental question about development philosophy. Verstappen's charge isn't just about points, it's about proving that Red Bull's approach actually works. The real test comes in 2026. Will McLaren's focused approach give them a decisive advantage when the new regulations arrive? Or will Red Bull's validated development tools and deeper understanding prove more valuable than the resources they sacrificed? This battle between immediate gratification and future planning reflects broader questions about success in modern Formula One. In a sport where regulations change dramatically, is it better to maximize current opportunities or invest everything in tomorrow's possibilities? The answer might determine which team dominates the next era of Formula One. We're watching history unfold in real time, with two championship-caliber organizations making completely opposite bets about the future. Only time will tell which philosophy proves correct. But the implication: Ferrari's season is spiraling out of control, and now the CEO just admitted what every fan already knows: other teams are simply running better than them. But here's the shocking twist that has the entire Formula One paddock buzzing. Picture this. Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, joins Ferrari with massive expectations. Fast forward to today, and he hasn't even stepped on a podium with the prancing horse. Charles Leclerc has managed just 7 podium finishes, and Ferrari is staring down their first winless season since 2021. This isn't just disappointing, it's catastrophic for a team with Ferrari's legacy. The drama really kicked off back in June when whispers started circulating around the Canadian Grand Prix paddock. Sources were claiming Ferrari was seriously considering replacing team principal Fred Vasseur. The rumors were so intense that Ferrari had to make an unprecedented move. They handed Vasseur a brand new multi-year contract in July just to silence the speculation. But here's where it gets interesting. That contract might not mean what everyone thinks it means. Fast forward to last month, and the rumor mill exploded again. This time, Christian Horner's name was being thrown around as a potential replacement. Now, here's what most people don't know. Ferrari actually did make an approach to Horner before he left Red Bull in July. However, industry insiders are saying Horner isn't interested in just being another team principal. He wants ownership, he wants shares, he wants real power. That's a completely different conversation. But the most revealing moment came when Ferrari CEO Benedetto Vigna made a statement that sent shockwaves through the sport. He openly admitted that rival teams seem to operate more smoothly than Ferrari. Think about that for a second. The CEO of one of the most prestigious brands in motorsport just publicly acknowledged they're being outrun by their competitors. That's not corporate speak. That's desperation. Here's where the story takes another bizarre turn. Ferrari Chairman John Elkann tried to show support for Vasseur at a recent event in Washington, giving him a public vote of confidence. But Vasseur's response was absolutely fascinating. Instead of graciously accepting the support, he claimed Elkann's speech was directed at a mysterious third party. What third party? Who is he talking about? This cryptic response has left everyone scratching their heads and wondering what's really happening behind closed doors at Maranello. The timing of all this couldn't be worse. Hamilton's move to Ferrari was supposed to be the missing piece of the puzzle. Instead, it's highlighted just how broken the machine really is. When you have a driver of Hamilton's caliber struggling to find speed in your car, the problem runs much deeper than just setup or strategy. We're talking fundamental issues with the car's design, the team's processes, or both. What makes this situation even more intriguing is the pattern we're seeing. Ferrari has a history of self-sabotage just when things should be coming together. They've had the resources, the drivers, and the heritage, but somehow they keep finding ways to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Is this just another chapter in that familiar story, or are we witnessing something different this time? The pressure is mounting from every direction. Tifosi around the world are losing patience. Shareholders are asking tough questions. Competitors are pulling further ahead. And with 4 races remaining in Brazil, Las Vegas, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi, time is running out to salvage anything from this disaster of a season. Vigne's commitment to working in a united and cohesive way sounds good on paper, but actions speak louder than words. When your CEO is publicly admitting other teams run more smoothly, when your team principal is talking about mysterious third parties, and when your star signing can't find the podium, unity might not be enough. The million-dollar question everyone's asking is whether Vasseur can survive this storm. That new contract might provide some protection, but in Formula One, contracts are just pieces of paper when results don't follow. The Horner situation proves Ferrari is at least exploring their options, even if nothing materialized this time around. What's particularly fascinating is how this compares to other teams currently excelling. Red Bull revolutionized their operations under Horner and Adrian Newey. McLaren has completely transformed their fortunes. Even Mercedes, despite their own struggles, maintains a level of operational excellence that Ferrari seems unable to match. As we head into the final stretch of this season, Ferrari finds itself at a crossroads. They can either use these remaining races to prove they're capable of turning things around, or they'll face an off-season filled with even more difficult questions about leadership, structure, and direction. The next few weeks will be crucial in determining not just how this season ends, but potentially the entire future of this legendary team. What if I told you that Oscar Piastri's recent struggles might actually reveal something shocking about his entire McLaren journey so far? A Formula One legend just dropped a theory that completely flips the narrative on its head, and it's going to change how you see this championship battle forever. Right now, Oscar Piastri sits just 1 point behind his teammate Lando Norris in what's become one of the most intense intra-team battles we've seen in years. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. According to 1997 world champion Jacques Villeneuve, Piastri's decline isn't what it seems. In fact, it might expose that everything we thought we knew about his meteoric rise was built on a foundation of sand. Let me paint you the picture of what's been happening. Earlier this season, Piastri looked unstoppable. The young Australian was matching and sometimes beating his more experienced teammate, racking up impressive results when McLaren had the dominant car. Everyone was saying he'd be stepped up to Norris's level, maybe even surpassed it. The future looked incredibly bright for the McLaren rookie. But then something shifted. After the summer break, as the championship fight intensified and other teams started closing the gap to McLaren, Piastri began to stumble. 4th in Singapore, 5th in both Austin and Mexico City. Meanwhile, Norris has been on fire, winning races and clawing back points in the championship standings. This is where Villeneuve's theory gets really interesting. He's suggesting that what we're witnessing isn't actually Piastri falling off a cliff performance-wise. Instead, he believes we're seeing the young driver exposed for operating at his absolute limit all along, while Norris was simply underperforming earlier in the season. Think about it this way. When you have a dominant car, and your only real competition is your teammate who isn't quite at their best, you might look like a superstar without actually having to dig deep into those final reserves of speed and racecraft. Villeneuve argues that's exactly what happened to Piastri. He was driving well, sure, but he wasn't being pushed to find that extra 2 or 3 tenths of pace that separate the good drivers from the great ones. Here's where the psychology gets fascinating. Villeneuve draws parallels to other sports, talking about teams that cruise through the regular season looking average, then suddenly become championship contenders when the pressure mounts. The flip side is equally true. Teams that dominate early can completely collapse when the stakes get higher. It's a mental game as much as a physical one. According to this theory, Norris wasn't the Norris we knew from the end of last season during those early races. He was struggling with car setup, confidence issues, and just wasn't extracting maximum performance. This created a window where Piastri could look exceptional without actually operating at the absolute pinnacle of his abilities. But then Baku happened. Max Verstappen started winning again. The championship fight heated up, and suddenly Norris found that extra gear. He stepped up his game significantly, driving faster and with more precision than he had all season. The problem for Piastri? He was already at his limit. This is where Villeneuve's experience as a former driver becomes crucial. He explains that when you're forced to find those extra few tenths of pace, everything changes. The car that felt perfect when you were driving within your comfort zone suddenly feels wrong. Every little imperfection gets magnified. You start doubting your driving style, analyzing data obsessively, and making setup changes that don't actually help. It's a vicious cycle that many drivers have experienced. You see your teammate pulling away, you try to match their pace, but instead of finding speed, you start making mistakes. Your confidence takes hits, and before you know it, you're overthinking every corner, every braking point, every throttle application. The timing element is particularly telling. McLaren stopped developing their current car early to focus resources on next year's regulations. This means the performance gap between teams has been closing, making every tenth of a second more crucial. When you had a dominant car, small performance differences between teammates didn't matter much. But as the field tightened, those differences became magnified. What makes this theory even more compelling is the consistency of the machinery. As Villeneuve points out, it's the same car, the same tires, similar track conditions. The fundamental variables haven't changed dramatically. So if one driver is suddenly finding significant pace while the other is struggling, it suggests the issue is more about extracting maximum performance rather than adapting to new circumstances. The mental side of this battle cannot be understated. When you realize your teammate has stepped up and you're struggling to match them, it gets inside your head. You start questioning everything you thought you knew about driving. You look at telemetry data, trying to find magic solutions that don't exist. You experiment with different approaches that take you further away from your natural rhythm. This psychological pressure is exactly what Villeneuve warns against. He emphasizes that drivers need to remember what made them successful in the first place and build from there, rather than completely reinventing their approach mid-season. The championship implications are massive. If Villeneuve's theory is correct, it suggests that Norris has been the stronger driver all along, just temporarily masked by his own struggles early in the season. It also raises questions about Piastri's ceiling and whether he can find another level when the pressure is at its highest. What makes this situation so fascinating is that we're watching it play out in real time. Every race weekend provides new evidence for or against this theory. Can Piastri rediscover his early season form, or will the pressure continue to expose these supposed limitations? The answer to that question might just determine who walks away with the championship when the checkered flag falls on this incredible season. When you think of Formula One legends, one name towers above the rest: Adrian Newey. The 66-year-old aerodynamics genius has been behind over 200 race wins and 26 championship titles across Red Bull, McLaren, and Williams. But here's the thing that's got everyone talking right now. This racing mastermind just identified a massive problem at his new team, Aston Martin. And they're scrambling to fix it before the game-changing 2026 season arrives. Let me tell you about the bombshell revelation that's sending shockwaves through the paddock. When Newey made his trackside debut in Aston Martin colors at Monaco back in May, he didn't sugarcoat his assessment. The team's simulation tools are broken. Not just underperforming, but completely failing to correlate with real-world data. For a sport where milliseconds matter and development never stops, this is like trying to navigate with a broken compass. Picture this scenario. You're designing the most advanced racing car in history, preparing for revolutionary 2026 regulations that will transform Formula One forever. 50% electrification, fully sustainable fuels, active aerodynamics, everything changes. And your primary research tool, the driver in the loop simulator, is giving you garbage data. That's exactly the situation Newey walked into when he joined Aston Martin as their managing technical partner earlier this year. But here's where the story gets interesting. Aston Martin isn't just sitting around hoping things magically improve. They're making strategic moves that could reshape their entire future. The first domino fell when they hired Giles Wood as simulation and vehicle modeling director last summer. Wood isn't just any engineer. He's worked closely with Newey at both McLaren and Redbull before stepping away from Formula One in 2017 to join Apple. His return to motorsport signals serious intent. Now comes the real game changer. Aston Martin has quietly brought in Marco Finello as a consultant, and this appointment is absolutely massive. Finello isn't just another engineer. He's the simulation guru who helped orchestrate Ferrari's dominant period during the Michael Schumacher era at the turn of the century. We're talking about someone who oversaw the development of Ferrari's first-ever simulator and held the position of head of vehicle dynamics from 1997 through Schumacher's final championship-winning season. In 2004, think about what this means. Finello was instrumental in creating the foundation that allowed Ferrari to dominate Formula One during their golden age. 5 consecutive Constructors' Championships, 5 consecutive Drivers' titles with Schumacher. Now, after 13 years away from Formula One involvement, he's returning to help Aston Martin solve their simulation crisis. The timing couldn't be more perfect. The connection runs deeper than you might expect. Enrico Cardile, who recently joined Aston Martin as Chief Technical Officer, after serving as Ferrari's technical director, reportedly recommended Finello for this role. It's like assembling an all-star team of technical excellence, with each piece carefully chosen to complement the others. But let's be realistic about the challenge ahead. Newey himself admitted that bringing Aston Martin simulation tools up to acceptable standards could take up to 2 years. That's a significant timeline in Formula One terms, where development cycles measure in months, not years. However, the 2026 regulation changes create a unique opportunity. Everyone starts from zero with the new rules, making this the perfect moment to rebuild from the ground up. The addition of Finello represents more than just technical expertise. It's a statement of ambition. Aston Martin isn't content with being midfield contenders. They're building the infrastructure necessary to challenge for championships. When you combine Newey's aerodynamic brilliance with Finello's simulation expertise and Wood's vehicle modeling knowledge, you're creating a technical triangle that could prove unstoppable. Here's what makes this particularly fascinating. Aston Martin's partnership with Honda begins next season, bringing championship-winning power units into the equation. Honda currently supplies Redbull, the team Newey just left after their recent dominance. The knowledge transfer and technical synergies could accelerate Aston Martin's development beyond anyone's expectations. The broader implications extend throughout the paddock. Other teams are watching these appointments nervously. When a team starts assembling this level of technical talent, especially with the 2026 reset approaching, it signals serious championship intentions. Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, and McLaren suddenly have a new competitor emerging from the shadows. What's particularly clever about Aston Martin's approach is the timing. Rather than panic hiring after problems emerge, they're proactively addressing weaknesses before they become critical. Newey identified the simulation shortcomings early, and management immediately began recruiting world-class solutions. This kind of strategic thinking separates championship contenders from also-rans. The Finello appointment also demonstrates how Formula One remains a relationship-driven sport. Technical excellence matters, but so do personal connections and trust. Cardile's recommendation carries weight precisely because he understands both Finello's capabilities and Aston Martin's needs. These human elements often prove as important as raw engineering talent. Looking ahead to 2026, Aston Martin's technical foundation appears increasingly formidable. Newey leading car development, Honda providing power units, enhanced simulation capabilities through Finello and Wood, and Cardile coordinating everything as Chief Technical Officer. The pieces are falling into place for something special. The message is clear. Aston Martin isn't just fixing their simulation problems. They're building championship-caliber infrastructure from the ground up. When the 2026 regulations arrive and everyone starts fresh, don't be surprised if the green cars emerge as genuine title contenders. The groundwork is being laid right now, one strategic appointment at a time. The Formula One championship battle is heading into its final stretch, and there's a massive wildcard that could completely flip the title race upside down. We're talking about engine penalties that might strike at the worst possible moment for our championship contenders. Picture this scenario. You're fighting for the World Championship, with just a handful of races left, and suddenly you're forced to start from the back of the grid because your engine components have reached their limit. This isn't just theoretical anymore. It's becoming a real threat that could decide who takes home the crown. Right now, the championship fight is incredibly tight, but lurking beneath the surface is this ticking time bomb that teams have been carefully managing all season long. Every Formula One team receives a strict allocation of power unit components at the beginning of each season, and once you exceed those limits, the penalties start raining down. Here's how the system works, and trust me, it's more complex than you might think. Each driver gets a specific number of each engine component for the entire season. We're talking about 4 internal combustion engines, 4 motor generator units for both heat and kinetic energy, 4 turbochargers, 2 energy stores, 2 control electronics units, and 8 exhaust systems. Teams treat these allocations like precious resources, carefully planning when to use each component. They'll often save fresh engines for power-hungry circuits like Spa or Monza, where that extra horsepower can make or break your race. It's like managing your energy in a video game. Use too much too early, and you're in trouble later. The penalty structure is brutal and unforgiving. The first time you exceed your allocation, you automatically drop 10 grid positions. Every subsequent violation costs you 5 more places. If you rack up 15 penalty positions in a single race weekend, you're automatically sent to the back of the grid, regardless of how fast you qualify. This season has already claimed several victims. Lewis Hamilton, Yuki Tsunoda, Fernando Alonso, Pierre Gasly, and several others have all served their time at the back of the grid. But here's where it gets really interesting. None of the current championship contenders have faced these penalties yet, which means they're all walking on thin ice. Among the title fighters, Lando Norris appears to be in the most precarious position. His retirement at the Dutch Grand Prix wasn't just costly in terms of championship points. It potentially depleted his pool of available engine components. An oil line failure during that weekend raised serious questions about whether he still has a full complement of power unit elements remaining. This puts McLaren in an incredibly difficult position. They're fighting for both the drivers' and constructors' championships, but they might be forced to take strategic penalties at the worst possible time. Imagine leading the championship and then having to start from the back of the grid. It's a nightmare scenario that could hand the title to your rivals on a silver platter. Max Verstappen at Red Bull faces his own unique challenges, particularly with exhaust components. While drivers get 8 exhaust systems for the entire season, Verstappen has already burned through 7, with 4 races and a sprint still remaining. Meanwhile, both McLaren drivers are only on their 3rd exhaust systems, giving them more breathing room. This discrepancy highlights how different teams manage their component life cycles. Red Bull's aggressive approach might have given them performance advantages earlier in the season, but now it's creating potential vulnerabilities when they can least afford them. The psychological pressure this creates cannot be understated. Team strategists are now playing a delicate balancing act between performance and preservation. Do you push your current components to their absolute limit and risk a catastrophic failure, or do you take a strategic penalty now when you might be able to minimize the damage? Weather conditions add another layer of complexity to this equation. Wet races are notoriously unpredictable. And starting from the back of the grid in changing conditions could either be a disaster or an opportunity. We've seen drivers make incredible comebacks through the field in mixed conditions, but banking on weather to save your championship is an incredibly risky strategy. The timing of any potential penalties becomes crucial. Taking a penalty at a track where overtaking is difficult could be championship-ending, while serving it at a circuit with multiple overtaking opportunities might be more manageable. Teams are probably already running complex simulations to determine the least damaging weekend to take any necessary penalties. What makes this situation even more dramatic is that we're at the point in the season where component failures become increasingly likely. These power units have been pushed to their limits for months, and the stress of high-performance racing takes its toll. Every practice session, every qualifying run, and every race increases the risk of a component giving up. The championship implications are staggering. A single engine penalty for any of the title contenders could completely reshape the point standings. In a fight where every point matters, losing the ability to score maximum points because of a grid penalty could be the deciding factor. As we head into the final races, this engine penalty situation adds an extra layer of tension and unpredictability to an already thrilling championship battle. Teams will need to balance aggression with caution, knowing that one wrong move could cost them everything they've worked for all season long.